The story of a nation is often told through noise, revolutions, wars, and uprisings. But sometimes, the loudest revolutions are born in silence. And in the heart of East Africa, one such silence has begun to shake the world. This is the story of Tanzania. A nation that chose dignity over dependency, pride over pity, and truth over illusion. For decades, Africa was not seen as a partner. It was treated as a project, something to fix, to manage, to control. Foreign aid flowed in, policies were dictated, and the continent's narrative was written elsewhere. But something inside began to change. A quiet resistance, one not built on chaos, but on clarity. And it started with nations like Tanzania. When the rest of the world wasn't watching, Tanzania began rewriting its destiny. Not through rebellion, not through violence, but through self-realization. It began by asking a simple question. Why must a land so rich in resources remain poor? Why must a people so gifted depend on others for survival? The answers were never truly economic, they were historical. For centuries, Africa's resources built empires, not African ones. Gold, oil, diamonds, coffee, cobalt, all extracted in the name of development. But development, as it was designed, never meant independence. Tanzania saw through the mirage. They realized that foreign aid was often a chain disguised as charity. Every loan came with conditions, every handshake came with hidden terms. The West called it help. But it was control, soft, subtle, and suffocating. And Tanzania said, no more. This wasn't just a policy shift. It was a declaration of spiritual freedom, a stand against the silent colonization of the modern age. While many nations looked westward for approval, Tanzania began looking inward, toward its people, its land, its potential. It wasn't an easy path. Standing alone never is. But courage is born when the pain of submission becomes greater than the fear of independence. So Tanzania started choosing differently. It started rejecting unfair mining contracts that left its people with crumbs. It started prioritizing education and agriculture over imported dependency. It began investing in infrastructure designed by Tanzanians, for Tanzanians. The world called it stubborn. But history will call it brave. Because true freedom isn't granted, it's claimed. And soon, the world noticed. From Paris to Washington, analysts whispered. Africa is changing. At first, they ignored it. Then, they ridiculed it. And now, they fear it. Because one nation's awakening is dangerous. But when a continent begins to awaken, that's unstoppable. Across the map, others began to follow Tanzania's path. Burkina Faso, Niger, Mali, all started standing taller. Refusing to be pawns in a global game. They stopped obeying. They started deciding. What was once called aid dependency is turning into economic sovereignty. What was once called Western partnership is being exposed as strategic dominance. The narrative is shifting. Africa is not a child waiting to be fed. Africa is a giant that was only sleeping. And Tanzania is the alarm clock that woke it up. But this rise didn't come without pressure. The global powers struck back. Through sanctions, media campaigns, and the same old colonial rhetoric dressed in modern clothes. Suddenly, African nations were labeled as unstable, radical, anti-West. But that's the price of independence. To be misunderstood by those who benefited from your silence. Tanzania didn't yield. It knew that the road to sovereignty is lonely. But it's the only road worth walking. This is not just about politics. It's about psychology. It's about the African mind learning to unlearn centuries of conditioning. For too long, Africans were taught that success meant imitation. To dress like the West, think like the West, and depend on the West. But a new generation is rewriting the script. They are thinkers, builders, innovators. They no longer dream of escaping Africa. They dream of building it. And that's the most powerful revolution of all. Because change doesn't begin in government halls. It begins in the hearts of people. The farmer who refuses to sell his land for cheap. The student who studies not to leave, but to lead. The leader who chooses his people over politics. Each of them is a soldier in this silent rebellion. And Tanzania has become their flag. When President Samia Suluhu Hassan speaks, there's a tone of balance, not submission, not confrontation, but clarity. She represents a leadership that doesn't shout, but acts. Quiet strength, the kind that doesn't seek headlines, but history. And that's what separates Tanzania's movement from others. It's not noise. It's purpose. It's not aggression. It's assertion. A calm, grounded belief that Africa deserves better, and it doesn't have to beg for it. Across the continent, you can feel the ripple. From the deserts of Niger to the savannas of Kenya. From the mountains of Ethiopia to the coasts of Ghana. There's a shared energy, a rising pulse of pride. Africa's future is no longer being written in foreign boardrooms. It's being written in classrooms, in villages, in streets where hope once seemed impossible. And make no mistake, the world is watching. Because this isn't just an African story. It's a global one. The balance of power is shifting. For the first time in centuries, Africa is not asking for permission. It's offering partnership, on its own terms. The West, used to dictating terms, doesn't know how to respond. They can't control what they can't predict. And Tanzania's unpredictability is its greatest weapon. It stands as a symbol, not just of resistance, but of rebirth. A living reminder that even after centuries of exploitation, the soul of Africa remains unbroken. Its people are done being defined by tragedy. Now, they're defined by tenacity. And when that spirit awakens, no empire, no system, no propaganda can stop it. Because the power of a continent united in purpose is stronger than any army. Africa is learning that unity is not just a dream, it's a necessity. And Tanzania, through its quiet defiance, has proven that leadership doesn't always roar, sometimes, it simply refuses to kneel. Look at the timeline of history, every empire that rose through exploitation eventually fell. And what we are witnessing now is the slow, inevitable crumbling of an old order. Africa will no longer be the world's mine, the world's field, or the world's dumping ground. It will be the world's mirror, reflecting back what true resilience looks like. And one day soon, when the world asks, how did this happen? The answer will not be in headlines, but in hearts, in the millions of Africans who decided that enough was enough. Because freedom is not given. It is realized. And once realized, it can never be taken away. This is Tanzania's legacy. A story not of rebellion, but of rebirth. A story of a nation that whispered, no more. And in doing so, gave a voice to an entire continent. So remember this moment. Because years from now, historians will look back and say, this was the turning point. The day when Africa stopped waiting for validation. The day when Tanzania chose courage over comfort. The day when silence became a revolution. And as the world trembles, Africa rises. Not with fury, but with purpose. Because when Africa speaks, it doesn't whisper. It roars.